A family photo from 1912 looks normal, but the strange symbol on the wall raises questions. Dr. Rebecca Walsh adjusted her reading glasses as she carefully examined the contents of her recently deceased grandmother's estate. The dusty attic of the Victorian home in Salem, Massachusetts, held decades of memories accumulated across 4 generations. Among yellowed letters tied with faded ribbons, vintage clothing wrapped in tissue paper, and tarnished jewelry boxes, she discovered an ornate wooden box containing family photographs dating back over a century. One particular photograph immediately caught her attention, drawing her historian's eye like a magnet. Taken in 1912, it showed her great-great-grandparents, Thomas and Elizabeth Harrington, standing proudly with their 3 children in what appeared to be their formal parlor. The pose was typical of the era, father standing behind his seated wife, children arranged beside them, all wearing their finest clothes with the stiff formality that early photography required. But something felt profoundly off about this seemingly innocent family portrait. Rebecca squinted at the image, her trained eye automatically scanning for details others might miss. Behind the family, barely visible on the ornate wallpaper, was an unusual symbol etched into the wall itself. It wasn't part of the decorative pattern that adorned the rest of the room. It appeared to be deliberately carved, or perhaps burned into the surface with careful precision. The symbol resembled an intricate compass rose, but with additional geometric patterns radiating outward that seemed almost ritualistic in their complexity. Rebecca had studied historical symbols throughout her career as a professor of American history at Boston University, specializing in the Industrial Revolution period, but this particular marking was entirely unfamiliar to her extensive knowledge. She felt a chill run down her spine as the implications dawned on her. This wasn't just a family portrait capturing a moment in time. It was evidence of something her ancestors had deliberately wanted to preserve for future generations to discover. The next morning, Rebecca spread the photograph across her cluttered desk at Boston University, where she taught American colonial and early industrial history to graduate students. The autumn sunlight streaming through her office windows provided perfect illumination, as she used a high-powered magnifying glass to study every detail of the mysterious symbol with scientific precision. The carved lines were deliberate and precise, suggesting someone had taken considerable time and care to create this marking. Each groove appeared to be exactly the same depth, indicating the use of professional tools rather than a casual scratch or accidental mark. She photographed the image with her high-resolution digital camera, carefully adjusting the contrast and brightness settings to make the symbol more visible against the busy wallpaper pattern. What emerged from her digital enhancement was even more intriguing than she had initially realized. The symbol contained multiple layers of meaning, with smaller geometric patterns nested within the larger design, like Russian dolls. Some elements reminded her of the nautical charts used by sea captains. Others resembled the precise architectural blueprints favored by engineers of the early industrial age. Rebecca's colleague, Dr. James Chen, knocked on her office door during his afternoon rounds. "Working on something particularly interesting?" he asked, noticing her intense concentration and the scattered papers covering every available surface. "Take a look at this," Rebecca said, showing him the enhanced image displayed on her computer screen. "It's from my family's collection, dated 1912. Have you ever seen anything like this symbol in your research?" James studied it carefully, his expertise in American industrial history complementing Rebecca's broader knowledge of the period. After several minutes of careful examination, he shook his head slowly. "The precision suggests it might be related to engineering or manufacturing," he mused thoughtfully. The early 1900s were a time of rapid industrial innovation in Massachusetts, especially in textile mills and shipbuilding operations. Rebecca nodded, but new questions were already forming in her mind. That evening, Rebecca visited her grandmother's house again, this time armed with a measuring tape, notebook, digital camera, and a growing sense of purpose. She needed to understand the exact layout of the room where the photograph was taken and determine if any traces of the mysterious symbol still existed beneath decades of renovations and updates. The house had been in the family for 4 generations, though it had been renovated multiple times to accommodate changing needs and modern conveniences. What was once the formal parlor had been converted into a comfortable modern living room, complete with contemporary furniture and fresh paint that concealed the room's original character. Rebecca examined the walls carefully with both her hands and eyes, feeling for slight irregularities in the surface that might indicate where the symbol had been carved. Her fingers traced along the wall methodically, searching for any depression or raised area that could provide a clue. The modern drywall and multiple layers of paint had effectively covered any trace of the original marking, but she could detect subtle differences in texture that suggested something had once been carved there. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her cousin Mark, who lived in Portland, Maine, and worked as a successful general contractor specializing in historic renovations. "Heard you're going through Grandma's things. Found anything particularly interesting or valuable?" Rebecca hesitated before responding, uncertain how much to reveal about her discovery. Mark was practical and level-headed, with extensive knowledge of old building construction techniques and materials. His expertise could prove invaluable in her investigation, but she wasn't ready to share the full extent of what she'd found. She decided to call him instead of texting back. "Mark, I found something strange in one of the old family photos, and I think it might be connected to the house itself. Can you come down this weekend? I could really use your help examining the house structure." "Sure, that sounds intriguing. What kind of strange are we talking about?" "The kind that makes me think our ancestors might have been involved in something we never knew about." Mark arrived Saturday morning with his pickup truck, loaded with construction tools, and a natural curiosity about old buildings that had served him well throughout his 20-year career in historic renovation. Together, they carefully examined the parlor walls using a professional stud finder and a thermal imaging device that Mark had borrowed from his construction company. The thermal imaging revealed fascinating details about the house's construction that weren't visible to the naked eye. Most of the walls showed the expected pattern of wooden studs and insulation, but one section displayed a distinctly different thermal signature that immediately caught their attention. "There," Mark said, pointing to a rectangular area on the wall where the thermal reading was noticeably different from the surrounding surface. "Something's definitely behind this drywall, either a void space or materials with different thermal properties. This is definitely not standard wall construction for this period." Rebecca felt her pulse quicken as the implications sank in. "Can we look inside without causing significant damage to the wall? I don't want to destroy anything important if this turns out to be a wild goose chase." "I can make a small exploratory hole using my oscillating tool," Mark assured her. "If there's nothing there, we can patch it easily and you'll never know we looked. But if there is something..." Mark carefully cut a small rectangular section of drywall, working slowly and methodically to minimize any potential damage. As the piece came free, they both peered into the space with flashlights and found something that took their breath away. A hidden compartment, approximately 2 feet square and 1 foot deep, containing a leather-bound journal and several rolled documents that had been carefully preserved in what appeared to be oiled cloth. Rebecca's hands trembled with excitement and nervous energy as she carefully extracted the items from their century-old hiding place. The journal's cover bore the same intricate symbol from the photograph, embossed in gold, that had tarnished with age, but remained clearly visible. The rolled documents appeared to be technical drawings and correspondence, all tied together with a silk ribbon that had somehow survived the decades. They moved to the kitchen table to examine their extraordinary discovery in better light. The journal belonged to Thomas Harrington, Rebecca's great-great-grandfather, and his handwriting was precise and methodical, recording what appeared to be detailed observations from meetings, experiments, and business dealings between 1910 and 1915. Each entry was dated and cross-referenced with symbols and codes that suggested a high level of organization and secrecy. "March 15, 1912, Rebecca read aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. "The prototype testing continues with promising results. We've achieved a 23% efficiency improvement over the standard oil methods currently in use. The investors are pleased with our progress, but we must maintain absolute secrecy until all patent applications are properly filed and protected." Mark looked over her shoulder, studying the neat handwriting and technical sketches that filled the margins. "Prototype of what exactly? This sounds like some kind of industrial process." Rebecca continued flipping through the pages, finding increasingly detailed technical sketches, chemical formulas, and what appeared to be business correspondence with several other families. The complexity and sophistication of the work was immediately apparent, even to someone without technical training. One entry caught her attention and made her stomach drop. April 2nd, 1912. "Received deeply disturbing news through our contacts about the Rockefeller interests and their industrial intelligence network. They are definitely aware of our work and are not pleased with our progress. We must be much more careful about security. The symbol will serve as our identification among trusted associates and a warning to others. The rolled documents revealed detailed engineering drawings for what appeared to be a revolutionary oil refining process, signed by several men including Thomas Harrington, and bearing official-looking seals and stamps. The dates corresponded with a crucial period in American industrial history, when Standard Oil's massive monopoly was being challenged and systematically broken up by federal government action. Rebecca realized with growing excitement that she wasn't just looking at forgotten family history, she was looking at a piece of American economic history that had been deliberately hidden from the world for over a century. Rebecca spent the following week immersed in research at Boston University's extensive library, diving deep into the historical context surrounding her family's discovery. In 1912, the Supreme Court had just ordered the breakup of Standard Oil, John D. Rockefeller's massive monopoly that had controlled nearly 90% of American oil refining and distribution. It was a time of tremendous upheaval and opportunity in the petroleum industry, with new companies and innovative technologies emerging rapidly to fill the void left by the monopoly's dissolution. She found references to several small oil companies that had operated in Massachusetts during this crucial period, many of which had mysteriously failed or been absorbed by larger corporations within just a few years of their founding. Thomas Harrington's name appeared in some business directories from the era as an industrial consultant, but frustratingly, no details about his specific work or clients were readily available in the public records. Dr. Chen proved invaluable in helping her research patent records from the early 1900s, using his connections at MIT's engineering library to access archived documents. "Here's something very interesting," he said, showing her a computer screen displaying scanned patent documents. A patent application was filed in March 1913 for an improved hydrocarbon processing method by something called the New England Industrial Cooperative. Thomas Harrington is listed as one of the primary inventors, along with 3 other men. What happened to the patent? Was it ever approved and commercialized? That's where the story gets strange and suspicious, Chen replied, scrolling through additional documents. The application was suddenly withdrawn in early 1914, just months before it would have been approved. There's no record of the technology ever being commercially developed or sold. It's as if they just gave up on something that could have been worth millions. Rebecca studied the technical drawings from Thomas's journal more carefully, comparing them with the patent application. Even with her limited understanding of chemistry and engineering, she could see this was sophisticated, groundbreaking work that represented a significant advancement over existing refining methods. That evening, she called her Aunt Margaret, her grandmother's older sister, who was now 83 and served as the family's unofficial historian and keeper of stories. Back in Thomas's journal, Rebecca found entries that took on entirely new meaning in light of her growing understanding of the historical context. The mysterious symbol wasn't just a family mark or decorative element, it was a sophisticated identification system for a network of inventors and small businessmen who were working together to compete with the industrial giants of their era. May 18th, 1914, she read with growing fascination. The fire changes everything we had planned. We are not the first group to face this kind of systematic pressure and intimidation, and we certainly won't be the last. The symbol must now serve a different purpose, not just identification among allies and collaborators, but as a warning and guide for future generations who might be able to succeed where we have failed. The journal revealed that Thomas and his associates had made a deliberate decision to document their work comprehensively and hide it in multiple locations, hoping that someday the technology could be safely developed when the political and economic climate was more favorable. They had created an intricate network of hidden records, with each participating family keeping a different crucial piece of the complete puzzle. The Blackwood family in Vermont has been entrusted with the detailed chemical formulations and processing specifications, Thomas had written in careful script. The Morrows in New Hampshire will preserve the mechanical equipment specifications and engineering drawings. The Clearys in Maine have agreed to safeguard all business correspondence and financial records. Only by bringing all these elements together can the complete process be properly reconstructed and implemented. Rebecca realized with mounting excitement that the family photograph had been deliberately staged, not just to preserve the symbol for posterity, but to serve as a coded map for future family members. The positioning of each family member in the formal portrait corresponded to specific geographic locations where the other collaborating families lived, and had hidden their portions of the documentation. She immediately called Mark to share her discovery. "I think I understand why the photograph was composed and taken exactly the way it was. It's not just a family portrait, it's actually a coded message about where the other pieces of this puzzle are hidden." "You mean there are other families out there with pieces of this same story?" "Exactly. And if I'm interpreting the geography correctly, I think I can find them." Rebecca's first destination was Montpelier, Vermont, where Thomas's journal had specifically indicated the Blackwood family had lived and operated a small chemical supply business in the early 1900s. At the Vermont Historical Society, she spent hours poring over property records, business directories, and family genealogies until she found confirmation that a Walter Blackwood had indeed owned and operated Blackwood Chemical Supplies from 1908 to 1916. The current property owner turned out to be Susan Blackwood Chen, a retired high school chemistry teacher who still lived in the sprawling Victorian house that her great-grandfather had built. When Rebecca called and explained her discovery, showing her digital photographs of Thomas's journal and the family photograph, Susan's reaction was immediate and dramatic. "I can't believe this is finally happening," Susan said, her voice filled with emotion. "I've been wondering about some strange things I found in our attic for years, but I never knew what they meant or who might be interested in them." Susan led Rebecca up to her well-preserved attic, where she had carefully maintained several glass bottles containing mysterious chemical samples and a leather-bound notebook filled with complex formulas written in the same precise handwriting style as Thomas's journal. The notebook bore an identical symbol embossed on its cover. "My great-grandfather was Walter Blackwood," Susan explained as they examined the materials together. "Family stories always said he was involved in some kind of important business venture that failed under mysterious circumstances, but no one ever talked about the specific details. There were always whispers about some kind of secret he kept, some knowledge that he said was too dangerous to share." The chemical formulas in Walter's notebook were incredibly advanced and sophisticated for their time period, representing innovations that wouldn't be commonly understood or implemented for decades. Rebecca photographed each page carefully, noting how the formulas complemented and completed the process descriptions found in Thomas's journal. "Susan, I think our great-grandfathers were part of something that could have fundamentally changed American industry if they had been allowed to develop and implement it." "What do you mean allowed? What stopped them?" Rebecca shared everything she had learned about the fire, the mysterious patent withdrawal, and the pressure from larger corporate interests. Susan's face grew thoughtful and sad as the implications became clear. The trail led them next to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, where they hoped to find descendants of the Morrow family, who, according to Thomas's journal, had been responsible for preserving the mechanical and engineering specifications. They found their answer at the Strawberry Banker Museum, where David Morrow served as the director of maritime history and had developed a reputation as an expert on early industrial technology in the region. David was initially skeptical when Rebecca and Susan appeared at his office with their story, but his attitude changed dramatically when Rebecca showed him the photograph, Thomas's journal, and Susan's chemical formulations. His eyes widened as he recognized the symbol that had appeared in his own family's mysterious artifacts. "Wait here, please," David said, disappearing into the museum's climate-controlled storage room. He returned 15 minutes later, carrying a wooden crate that looked like it hadn't been opened in decades. "My great-great-grandfather left these items with very specific instructions that they were to be kept safe and preserved until someone came asking about the symbol and could explain its meaning." The wooden crate contained detailed mechanical drawings that showed precise plans for oil refining equipment that was decades ahead of anything that existed in 1914. The technical specifications were extraordinary in their sophistication and attention to detail. Along with the drawings were several metal components that appeared to be precision-machined prototypes of key mechanical parts needed for the revolutionary process. Their final destination was Bar Harbor, Maine, where they hoped to find descendants of the Cleary family, who, according to Thomas's records, had been entrusted with preserving all business correspondence and financial documentation from the New England Industrial Cooperative. The local historical society directed them to Patricia Cleary Williams, an elderly woman in her late 70s who lived in a charming seaside cottage that had been in her family for over a century. When they called to arrange a visit, Patricia's response surprised them completely. "I've been waiting 70 years for someone to come asking about that symbol," she said with obvious relief and satisfaction. "My grandmother told me that someday people would come who could put all the pieces together and finish what our ancestors had started." Patricia's collection contained the complete business correspondence and financial records from the New England Industrial Cooperative, including detailed documentation of the threats, intimidation, and industrial sabotage they had faced. Most importantly, she had preserved letters between the four families planning exactly how to preserve their revolutionary work for future generations to discover and develop. With all four pieces of the century-old puzzle finally reunited, Rebecca and her newfound collaborators could see the full scope of their ancestors' remarkable achievement. The oil refining process they had developed was not only revolutionary for 1914, but contained fundamental principles and innovations that remained relevant and valuable for modern sustainable energy production and environmental protection efforts. Rebecca arranged a meeting with Dr. Robert Harrison, a distinguished chemical engineering professor at MIT who specialized in the historical development of industrial processes and had written extensively about early petroleum refining innovations. When she presented him with the complete documentation, Thomas's journal, Walter's chemical formulations, David's mechanical specifications, and Patricia's business records, his reaction was immediate and profound. "This is absolutely extraordinary," Dr. Harrison said, studying the formulas and mechanical drawings with growing amazement. They had figured out catalytic processes and efficiency improvements that weren't officially invented and implemented until the 1930s and 1940s. If this technology had been successfully developed and commercialized in 1914, it could have completely changed the entire trajectory of the petroleum industry and possibly prevented decades of environmental damage. "Why wasn't it developed?" Rebecca asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Because it threatened too many established interests and powerful people," Dr. Harrison replied grimly. "The breakup of Standard Oil created opportunities for innovation, but it also created fierce competition among remaining companies to control those opportunities. Small innovators like your ancestors were systematically crushed by forces much larger and more ruthless than themselves." The group made a collective decision to honor their ancestors' original intention by ensuring their story was finally told and their innovations properly recognized. Rebecca wrote a comprehensive research article for the Journal of American Industrial History, documenting not just the technical innovations, but the human story of courage, collaboration, and preservation that had kept the knowledge alive for over a century. Susan donated her great-grandfather's chemical samples to MIT's Chemistry Museum, where they would be preserved and studied by future researchers. David arranged for the mechanical components to be permanently displayed in Portsmouth's Maritime Museum, highlighting New Hampshire's important but often overlooked role in early industrial innovation. Standing in her grandmother's parlor one final time, Rebecca looked at the wall where the mysterious symbol had been carved over a century ago. The mark itself was gone, covered by layers of renovation and modernization, but its essential message had finally been delivered to exactly the right people at exactly the right time. The 1912 family photograph now hung in a place of honor in Rebecca's home, no longer just a forgotten family portrait, but a powerful testament to the courage and foresight of people who refused to let important innovations die, even when they couldn't live to see them flourish.